My fiancé's best friend treated my house like his personal shopping mall for months, and I finally snapped after reaching my limit. Hey Reddit. This is a story I never thought I'd have to share, but here we are. I've been bottling this up for months, and I need to let it out. For context, I 32F have been engaged to my fiancé, Derek 34M, for about a year now. We've been together for 3 years, and for the most part, he's been an amazing partner. The problem, however, lies with his best friend, Todd 34M. Todd wasn't just Derek's best friend, he was practically family. They grew up in the same small town, went to the same college, and even lived together for a few years after graduation. Derek used to tell me endless stories about their antics, like the time they road tripped across 3 states for a concert, or when they built a makeshift bar in their dorm room. It was clear Todd held a special place in Derek's life. When I first met him, I didn't mind. I even thought it was endearing how loyal Derek was to his friend. But the red flags started popping up early in our relationship. Todd had this habit of making backhanded comments that seemed harmless on the surface but left me feeling uneasy. Once, when Derek brought me to a party Todd was hosting, Todd loudly proclaimed to the room that I must have hypnotized Derek because he used to swear he'd never settle down. Everyone laughed, including Derek, but I couldn't help but feel like Todd was taking a jab at me. Over time, I noticed that Todd had a way of inserting himself into every aspect of our lives. He'd call Derek at all hours to vent about his latest dating disasters or complain about work. He'd invite himself along to our plans, even when it was something clearly meant to be a couple's activity. Derek didn't see the problem, brushing it off as Todd just being Todd. Things took a turn when Derek and I moved in together about a year ago. Our new place was small but cozy, and I was excited to build a life together. At first, Todd's visits were sporadic and relatively harmless. He'd drop by for a beer or to watch a game, and while it sometimes felt intrusive, I figured it wasn't worth making a fuss over. But then the visits became more frequent and more disruptive. Todd would show up unannounced, often when I was in the middle of working from home or trying to unwind after a long day. He'd let himself in without knocking, flop onto our couch, and act like he owned the place. I tried setting boundaries by gently suggesting he call ahead, but he'd just laugh it off, saying he and Derek didn't need formalities like that. The first time Todd took something without asking, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Derek had invited him over to help assemble some furniture, and I came downstairs to find Todd rummaging through the fridge. He pulled out a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion and said, "This looks good, mind if I open it?" I was too stunned to respond, and before I could stop him, he had already popped the cork. Derek didn't seem to think it was a big deal, so I let it slide. But that incident set the tone for what was to come. Over the next few months, Todd treated our home like his personal shopping mall. He'd take snacks, drinks, and even household items without so much as a thank you. One time, he borrowed our ladder for some home repairs and didn't return it for weeks. Another time, he took my expensive stainless steel pot, saying he needed it for a big family dinner. It came back scratched and stained. It wasn't just the physical items, it was the principle. Our home stopped feeling like a safe, private space. Every time I heard Todd's car pull into the driveway, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Things escalated when Todd started helping himself to my personal belongings. One day, I went to use my favorite moisturizer, an expensive brand I splurged on, and found the jar nearly empty. I confronted Derek, who sheepishly admitted that Todd had asked to borrow it because he'd forgotten his toiletries during an overnight stay. I was furious. Derek promised to replace it, but the damage was done. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. I had just returned from a long day of errands, looking forward to a quiet evening at home. When I walked in, I found Todd lounging on our couch, wearing my favorite jacket. It wasn't just any jacket, it was a designer piece I had saved up for months to buy. "Todd, where did you get that jacket?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Oh," Derek said, "I could borrow it for a date tonight." "Hope that's cool." "Cool?" No, it wasn't cool. It felt like the ultimate slap in the face. Derek was sitting right there, watching TV like nothing was wrong. "Derek, why would you let him take my jacket without asking me?" Derek shrugged. "It's just a jacket." I saw red. "Todd, take off my jacket and leave. Right now." Todd looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Derek tried to mediate, saying I was overreacting, but I wasn't having it. I told Todd he was no longer welcome in our home until he learned to respect boundaries. After Todd left, Derek and I had a massive argument. He accused me of being too harsh, and I accused him of enabling Todd's behavior. Derek claimed Todd didn't mean any harm and that I was blowing things out of proportion. I told him I was done being disrespected in my own home and that if he couldn't set boundaries, then I would. The next few days were tense. Derek barely spoke to me, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Part of me wondered if I had gone too far, but deep down, I knew I was in the right. A week later, Todd showed up unannounced with a garbage bag filled with my stuff. He dumped it on the floor and muttered something about me being uptight before storming out. Derek tried to smooth things over, but I stood my ground. I told him that Todd was no longer welcome in our home unless he could show some respect. It's been a few months since then, and things have mostly settled down. Derek and Todd still hang out, but it's always at Todd's place now. I've also made it clear that if Todd wants to borrow anything, he needs to ask me directly. Looking back, I wish I had set boundaries earlier. It's easy to let things slide when you're trying to keep the peace, but sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means ruffling a few feathers. Update. After my confrontation with Todd and the heated argument with Derek, the house felt tense. Derek was distant, and I started to wonder if I'd driven a wedge between him and his best friend. For a few days, I tried to focus on work and avoid the subject altogether. However, the elephant in the room grew larger every day. One evening, Derek came home later than usual. I could tell he had been with Todd because of the faint smell of beer and the slight tension in his expression. I decided it was time to break the silence. "Derek, we need to talk." He sighed, sat down on the couch, and looked at me expectantly. "I'm not trying to ruin your friendship with Todd," I began. "But you have to understand how disrespectful it feels to have someone treat our home like a free-for-all." Derek rubbed his temples. "I get it, okay? But Todd's been through a lot. He's had a rough year his breakup with Sarah, losing his job. It's been hard for him." That caught me off guard. I hadn't realized how much Todd had been struggling. I softened my tone. "I understand that, Derek, and I'm sorry he's going through a tough time. But that doesn't give him the right to take advantage of us. If anything, you should be helping him learn to stand on his own 2 feet, not enabling this behavior." Derek looked at me for a long moment before nodding. "You're right. I think I've been making excuses for him because I don't want to lose him as a friend." That admission hit me hard. It wasn't just about Todd's behavior, it was about Derek's fear of change. I told him that setting boundaries didn't mean ending a friendship, and he promised to talk to Todd about respecting our space. Another update. The next weekend, Derek invited Todd over to talk. I made myself scarce, deciding to run errands while they hashed things out. When I returned home, Derek was sitting on the couch, looking defeated. "How did it go?" I asked hesitantly. Derek shook his head. "Not great. Todd thinks you're overreacting and that I'm taking your side over his." I sighed. "Did you explain why this isn't about choosing sides?" "I did," Derek replied. "But he's stubborn. He said he's just going to keep his distance for a while." Part of me felt relieved. Maybe some space would be good for all of us. But another part of me felt guilty. Todd clearly didn't understand how his actions had affected me, and I wondered if I could have handled things differently. A few days later, I got an unexpected text from Todd. It read, "I didn't mean to make you feel disrespected. Sorry if I crossed any lines." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a start. I responded by thanking him for reaching out and suggesting we move forward with clearer boundaries. For a while, things seemed to improve. Todd stopped showing up unannounced, and Derek and I started rebuilding the harmony in our relationship. But it didn't last long. One evening, Derek came home from hanging out with Todd and told me something that made my heart sink. "Todd's been saying he feels like I'm not the same guy anymore," Derek said. "Like I'm letting you control everything." That comment hit me like a punch to the gut. I told Derek that standing up for myself wasn't about control, it was about mutual respect. He nodded but didn't say much else. I could see the strain this was putting on him, and it broke my heart. Final update. It's been about 6 months since the confrontation with Todd, and I'm happy to say that things have finally settled into a better place. But it wasn't easy getting here. After Todd's initial apology, he kept his distance for several weeks. During that time, Derek and I had several long, honest conversations about our relationship, our boundaries, and how we wanted to handle situations like this in the future. I admitted that I sometimes felt like Derek prioritized his friendship with Todd over our relationship. Derek, in turn, confessed that he had a hard time standing up to Todd because he saw him as a brother. It was a tough conversation, but it brought us closer together. The turning point came when Todd invited both of us to his birthday party. I was hesitant to go, but Derek encouraged me to give it a shot. When we arrived, Todd surprised me by pulling me aside and offering a heartfelt apology. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "You were right. I've been selfish, and I didn't realize how much it was affecting you. I'm sorry." I was taken aback but grateful. I told him that I appreciated the apology and that I wanted to move forward with a clean slate. Since then, Todd has made a genuine effort to be more respectful. He always asks before borrowing anything, and he stopped showing up unannounced. Derek and I have also made a point to prioritize our relationship, setting aside time for just the two of us. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I doubted myself, but it ultimately strengthened my relationship with Derek and even improved my dynamic with Todd. Sometimes, the hardest conversations are the ones that lead to the most growth.